I woke up feeling like the world was finally mine. Today I turned 18, and it wasn't just a birthday. It was a ticket to adulthood, full of possibilities and freedom. But deep down, something stirred, like I was standing on the edge of something unknown. My parents were away at a conference, leaving the house in my hands, and I decided to throw a party, ignoring my dad's strict orders to keep everything in check. Something told me this night would change everything, but I didn't know what it would lead to. My name's Patrick. I'm 18. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska. The morning started with me lying in bed, staring at the ceiling. Sunlight slipped through the blinds, and I tried to figure out why I felt both excited and lost. 18's a big deal, right? I could vote now, buy lottery tickets, even move out if I wanted. But instead of joy, I felt this weird pressure, like I was supposed to know who I'd become. I pushed those thoughts aside and went downstairs to eat. The fridge was nearly empty, just a couple of yogurts and a can of soda. My dad always said I needed to learn to plan, but I just grabbed a yogurt and started thinking about the party. I wanted the night to be special, not just a bunch of people hanging out, but something memorable. I texted a few friends to come over at 8 and started figuring out what needed to be done. The house looked decent, but I decided to clean up so no one would notice I was breaking my dad's rules. He was always strict: no parties, no loud guests, no mess. But today I felt like a rebel, ready to defy every rule. I turned on some music and started vacuuming the living room, imagining my friends dancing and laughing. While I cleaned, my thoughts drifted back to what was bothering me. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but it had to do with my future. School was over, college was coming, but I didn't feel ready. Everyone around me talked about their plans. Some wanted to be doctors, others dreamed of traveling. And me? I didn't even know what I wanted. Maybe that's why I was so focused on this party. It was my way of escaping. I wanted to surround myself with people so I wouldn't have to think about what was next. By noon, I finished cleaning and sat on the couch checking my phone. My friends confirmed they'd come, and I started making a shopping list. I needed food, drinks, maybe something stronger. My friend Jake promised to help with alcohol, and I hoped he wouldn't let me down. I didn't want the party to turn into chaos, but a little fun wouldn't hurt. I pictured us all in the living room, playing cards or dancing, and it made me smile. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was because of Claire, my friend who'd been acting weird lately. She clearly wanted to be closer, but I wasn't sure I felt the same. I brushed it off and focused on the party. Whatever happened, this night was supposed to be the start of something new. I just didn't know how much it would change my life. What would I find in the chaos of this night? And why did I already feel like it would be more than just a party? I stood in the living room, holding my shopping list, feeling adrenaline pumping through my veins. The party I'd planned wasn't just a way to celebrate turning 18. It was my chance to prove I could take control of my life. But deep down, I wondered if I was doing the right thing by ignoring my dad's rules. Thoughts about Claire, who'd been acting way too pushy lately, only made that unease worse. I started to suspect that girls might not be my thing at all, and that idea scared me more than I was ready to admit. What would this night reveal? Could it answer the questions I was too afraid to ask myself? I decided to focus on tasks to avoid dwelling on those thoughts. First, I needed to get alcohol because without it, the party risked being a total snooze. My friend Jake said he knew a guy with a fake ID who could buy a couple of cases of beer and a bottle of something stronger. I texted him to confirm the details, and he said it was all set, but I still worried. If anything went wrong, my dad would kill me, even if he found out a month later. I tried to push that aside and headed to the store for chips, soda, and plastic cups. At the store, I wandered the aisles, tossing stuff into my cart. While I was picking out sauces, Mrs. Harris, our nosy neighbor who always knew everyone's business, came up to me. She smiled and asked how I was doing, then mentioned she saw my parents leave town. I lied, saying I was just getting groceries for the week, but I could feel my cheeks burning. If she suspected anything and told my dad, I was done for. I paid quickly and rushed home, hoping Mrs. Harris wouldn't dig any deeper. Back at the house, I started unpacking and tidying up the living room. I moved all the breakable stuff and hid my mom's favorite vases in the closet. While I was shoving the couch to make room for dancing, my phone buzzed. Claire texted that she'd come early to help. I told her it was fine, but inside I felt a pang of irritation. She was a great friend, always there for me. But lately her looks and casual touches made me nervous. I didn't know how to tell her I wasn't interested in anything more than friendship, especially when I wasn't even sure what I wanted. I turned on a playlist to test the speakers and started setting out snacks on the kitchen table. The music helped me relax, but thoughts about Claire and my doubts kept creeping back. I remembered how last week she grabbed my hand while we were walking home from school, and how I instinctively pulled away. It wasn't because of her. She's pretty, smart, all that. Something inside me just didn't click. I wondered if it wasn't about Claire, but about me. Maybe I didn't like girls at all. That thought hit me like a lightning bolt, and I froze, holding a bag of chips. I quickly brushed it off, telling myself I was just stressed about the party. By 3 o'clock, the house was ready. I checked that everything was clean and even wiped down the dining room table, though I knew no one would sit there. Jake texted that he got the beer and rum and would bring it by 6. I let out a sigh of relief, but the tension didn't go away. This party was supposed to be my moment, my way of feeling alive. But the closer the evening got, the more I felt like I was on the edge of something bigger than just a celebration. What would I learn about myself when everyone showed up? And why did thinking about Claire make me feel confused instead of happy? I watched the guests fill the living room, my heart beating faster from a mix of excitement and nerves. The party I'd planned so carefully was finally happening, and the house buzzed with laughter, music, and chatter. But even in this chaos of fun, I couldn't shake the feeling that something inside me was off. Claire, with her too close looks and touches, only made that confusion worse, and I started wondering if I could keep pretending everything was fine. What would this night drag to the surface? And how would I handle it if the truth felt too heavy? By 8 o'clock, there were about 15 people in the house, and everyone brought something. Homemade punch, a box of donuts, you name it. Jake proudly handed me 2 cases of beer and a bottle of rum, whispering that his guy came through. I thanked him and started pouring drinks, trying to make sure no one went overboard. The music was loud, and a few people were already dancing in the corner of the living room while others sat on the couch playing cards. I smiled, seeing everyone having fun, but inside something tightened, like I was both here and somewhere else. Claire showed up next to me while I was pouring punch in the kitchen. She wore a bright blue dress and smiled in a way that would have made any other guy melt. She took a cup from my hands, brushing my fingers lightly, and said the party was a hit. I nodded but felt myself tense up. Her gaze lingered on me a little too long, and I quickly turned away, pretending to check the ice. I didn't want to hurt her, but her attention made me feel trapped. Why couldn't I just relax and feel the same way she did? I escaped to the living room to distract myself and joined some friends playing charades. We cracked up when someone tried to act out a pop star, and another guy shouted all the wrong answers. For a moment, I felt lighter, like all my worries melted into this silly fun. But then Claire was next to me again, sitting so close our knees almost touched. She leaned in, whispering that I looked great, and I felt my cheeks burn. I mumbled something vague and stood up to grab more chips, even though the bowl was nearly full. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter and took a deep breath. What was wrong with me? Everyone was laughing, drinking, dancing, and I felt like an outsider at my own party. I thought back to school, when guys talked about girls, bragging about dates, and I always stayed quiet, pretending I just had bad luck. But the truth was, I never looked at girls the way they did. That thought hit me again, but I brushed it off, blaming the punch or exhaustion. I just wanted the night to go smoothly, for everyone to leave happy so I could crash without overthinking. Someone switched to a new song, and the crowd in the living room erupted in cheers. I went back to my friends, deciding I'd had enough of hiding. We started dancing, and for a second I let myself get lost in the music, the movement, the laughter. But even then, I caught myself scanning for Claire, not because I wanted to be with her, but because I was scared she'd come closer. What would this night do to me? And why did I feel like I was on the edge of something that could change everything? I was dancing in the living room, trying to lose myself in the music, when the front door swung open and Raymond walked in. My stepbrother, who I hadn't seen in over a year, stood there in a military jacket with a wide smile that took my breath away. His arrival hit me like a jolt of electricity. I wasn't expecting him, but something inside me came alive seeing his rugged frame and familiar features. But when Claire rushed to hug him and he returned her warmth, I felt a sharp pang of something close to jealousy. Why did his presence hit me so hard? And what was this confusion I couldn't explain? Raymond left for the Navy when I was 16, and we barely talked since then, just a few texts on holidays. He was 5 years older, always seemed cool but distant, like a movie hero. Now he was in my house, and I couldn't take my eyes off him. His hair was shorter than I remembered, his shoulders broader, but his smile was the same, slightly teasing but warm. The guests buzzed, greeting him, and Jake slapped him on the back, asking how the Navy was. Raymond said something funny and everyone laughed, but I stood off to the side, trying to get my thoughts together. Claire grabbed his arm right away, chattering about how great it was that he was back. She looked too happy, and I noticed her hand lingering on his elbow. I told myself I didn't care, but inside I was boiling. I didn't get why it bothered me so much, but every time she laughed at his words, I felt out of place. I walked over to the drink table, pretending to be busy, but kept watching them out of the corner of my eye. Raymond slid into the group so easily, like he'd never left, and it only made my confusion worse. I poured myself some punch, trying to look calm, and joined some friends talking about a game. But my mind was on Raymond. I remembered how we used to hang out when I was a kid, back when our parents first got married. He taught me to ride a bike, teased me, but was always there when I fell. Back then, I looked up to him with admiration, but now this feeling was different, deeper, more tangled. I pushed those thoughts away, telling myself I was just shocked he was here. But why couldn't I stop staring at him? Raymond came over to me while I was by the speakers, adjusting the volume. He asked how I was holding up, and his voice was so familiar I forgot about the guests for a second. I said everything was cool, but I could feel my voice shake. He looked at me like he saw something I didn't and said I'd grown up. I laughed, trying to hide how awkward I felt, but his gaze lingered, and I felt a warmth in my chest. Claire popped up again, cutting us off, and asked Raymond to dance. He agreed, and I was left alone, watching them head into the crowd. I went back to my friends, trying to jump into the conversation, but my eyes kept finding Raymond. He moved with confidence, laughed, and everyone around him seemed drawn to his energy. I told myself it was normal. He's my brother, I'm just happy to see him. But something about how my heart reacted to his smile said that wasn't the whole truth. What would I feel if he stuck around? And why did his closeness with Claire stir up such a weird unease in me? I sat on the couch, surrounded by friends, trying to focus on their laughter, but thoughts of Raymond wouldn't leave me alone. The party was in full swing, and someone suggested playing Truth or Dare to spice things up. But when my turn came, the question they asked made my heart stop. It was too personal, too close to what I was trying to hide. I lied to get out of it, but my eyes drifted to Raymond, and I felt everything inside me tighten. What would I give away if the game went too far? And how would I handle it if my feelings became obvious to everyone? We were all sitting in a circle on the living room floor, sipping punch and teasing each other. The music was turned down so we could hear the questions, and the vibe was getting looser. Jake, already a bit tipsy, declared he wanted to stir things up and pulled out an empty bottle to spin for picking players. When it pointed at me, he grinned and asked if I'd ever had a secret I was scared to tell even my best friend. The question hit like a punch. I felt blood rush to my face and mumbled something about skipping school, hoping no one noticed how shaken I was. But I couldn't help glancing at Raymond, who sat across from me, watching me closely. He didn't say anything, but his eyes seemed to see right through me. I quickly looked away, feeling my cheeks burn, and took a sip of punch to cover my nerves. The game moved on, and soon the bottle pointed at Claire. She picked Dare, and someone, giggling, told her to kiss the most attractive person in the room. My heart froze. I knew she'd pick Raymond. It was obvious from how she'd been hovering around him all night. And when she smiled and leaned toward him, I felt something inside me snap. But Raymond, to my surprise, leaned in and pecked her on the cheek, laughing that he wasn't here for a show. Everyone cheered, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Claire pouted playfully but moved on to chatting with others, and I sat there, trying to sort out my feelings. The relief I felt was too strong, and that scared me. Why did it matter so much that he didn't kiss her for real? I glanced at Raymond, and he caught my eye, raising an eyebrow like he was checking if I was okay. I nodded, but inside I was a mess. I couldn't keep pretending this was just happiness about him being back. What I felt was something bigger than I was ready to admit. The game went on, but I couldn't focus anymore. Every time Raymond laughed or answered a question, I found myself watching him. His voice, his movements, even the way he casually pushed his hair back. It all pulled me in, and I hated myself for it. I told myself it was wrong, that he was my stepbrother, that I was just confused. But every time our eyes met, my heart beat faster, and it wasn't just nerves. It was something I couldn't say out loud. By the end of the game, I was on edge. Someone suggested going back to dancing, and people started getting up, but I stayed put, pretending to tie my shoelaces. Raymond came over and asked if I was tired of all the chaos. I said I was fine, but my voice sounded shaky. He smiled and said we needed to talk, but not here, not now. I nodded, feeling anticipation build inside me. What did he want to say? And why was I so scared, but also hoping that this talk would change everything? I stood by the kitchen table, stacking empty cups to distract myself from the party's noise, but thoughts of Raymond wouldn't let go. After the truth or dare game, I felt exposed, like everyone could see what was churning inside me. Raymond had suggested we talk, and that promise hung in the air, making my heart race. When he walked into the kitchen, his presence filled the room, and I knew this conversation could change everything. Would I be able to be honest with him? And what would I learn about myself if I opened up? Raymond closed the door behind him, muffling the music and laughter from the living room. He looked relaxed, but his eyes were serious, like he knew this moment mattered. I pretended to be busy cleaning, but he told me to stop fussing and just talk to him. His voice was soft but firm, and I felt the tension in my chest ease a little. We started reminiscing about old times, running around the yard, him teasing me for being clumsy. I laughed, but inside I was shaking because I wanted to say more than just childhood stories. I gathered my courage and asked how life was in the Navy, expecting some typical adventure story. But Raymond hesitated, looking away, then said it was where he started questioning things about himself. I froze, feeling the air get heavier. He shared that he met someone who made him think about his sexuality, and though it was tough, he was starting to accept himself. His words hit me hard, not because they shocked me, but because they mirrored my own thoughts. I stared at him, not sure what to say, but feeling something inside me break and rebuild at the same time. I mumbled that I might not be sure about liking girls either, and it was the first time I'd said anything like that out loud. My voice shook, but Raymond nodded like it wasn't a big deal. He said it was okay to not know and that he'd struggled with it for a long time too. His support was so genuine that I felt warmth in my chest, but also fear, because I wasn't ready to name what I was feeling. We were standing close, and I noticed his hand brush mine when he reached for a cup. It was fleeting, but my body reacted like I'd been shocked. Before I could say anything, the door swung open and Claire burst in, holding an empty chip bowl. She jokingly asked if we were hiding anything good, and I stepped back, feeling the moment shatter. Raymond smiled at her, but I saw his eyes flick back to me like he wanted to keep going. Claire started chatting about the party, and I said I'd go check the music just to get out. I walked into the living room, but my heart was pounding, and I couldn't stop thinking about what he'd said. His words about accepting himself echoed in my head, and I felt like I was on the edge of something huge. I blended into the crowd, pretending to dance, but all I could think about was Raymond and our talk. He was so close to understanding me, and I was so close to confessing. But what if I wasn't ready? And why did his brief touch still burn on my skin, making me want to go back to him? I stepped out of the kitchen, still reeling from Raymond's words, but the party was starting to feel too loud, too crowded. My heart was racing, and I knew I needed a minute to get my head straight. When someone suggested starting a bonfire in the backyard, I jumped at the idea, hoping fresh air would clear my mind. But when I saw Raymond join us, carrying an armful of firewood, I realized I couldn't outrun what I was feeling. What would happen if we ended up alone? And how would I handle this pull toward him that kept growing stronger? We gathered in the backyard, where old lawn chairs were scattered around, and I watched Raymond toss logs into the fire pit, my heart speeding up. The flames caught fast, lighting up everyone's faces with a warm glow. The music from the house was just a faint hum now, and the crackle of the fire mixed with my friend's chatter. I grabbed a blanket from the garage and spread it on the grass, trying to act normal, but every move Raymond made drew my eyes. He looked so comfortable, joking with Jake about some old camping trip, but I could sense his focus on me, like he was waiting for something. I sat on the blanket, pulling my knees up and tried to tune into the conversation. Claire was telling a story about a disastrous hike from last summer, and everyone laughed, but I was only half there. My mind kept replaying our kitchen talk, his confession, my shaky admission, the way his hand brushed mine. I glanced at him and he was already looking at me, his expression soft but intense. It felt like we were having a silent conversation, and it twisted my stomach with nerves and something else I wasn't ready to name. Someone passed around a bottle of soda, and when it reached me, Raymond leaned over to hand it off. His fingers grazed mine, and I swear the air between us crackled. I muttered a thanks and looked away, but my skin tingled where he'd touched me. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination, but the way he shifted closer, sitting just a foot away on the blanket, made it hard to believe that. Claire noticed and teased that we were hogging the blanket, but her tone was light, not suspicious. Still, I scooted over, trying to put distance between me and Raymond, even though every part of me wanted to stay close. The fire was dying down, and someone suggested telling ghost stories to keep things lively. I wasn't feeling it, so I offered to grab more wood from the shed. Raymond stood, saying he'd help, and my heart leaped into my throat. We walked to the shed in silence, the fire's glow fading behind us. Inside, it was dark and smelled like cedar, and I fumbled for the light switch. Raymond reached past me to flip it on, and for a second we were so close I could feel the warmth of his arm. I stepped back, grabbing a bundle of logs, but my hands were trembling. He didn't move, just stood there, looking at me like he was trying to figure something out. I tried to joke about how heavy the wood was, but my voice came out too quiet. He took a step closer and my breath hitched. He said we didn't finish our talk, and his voice was low like he didn't want anyone else to hear, even though we were alone. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak, and he reached out, his hand hovering near my arm but not touching. It was like he was giving me a choice, and I wanted to close that distance, but fear held me back. What would happen if I let myself feel this? Before I could decide, Claire's voice cut through the night, calling us back to the fire. I grabbed the logs and rushed out, my face burning, and Raymond followed, carrying another stack. Back at the fire, everyone was laughing, completely unaware of the storm inside me. I tossed the wood into the pit, watching the flames flare up, and sat back down, avoiding Raymond's eyes. But I could feel him watching me, and it was like a pull I couldn't ignore. What would I do if we got another moment alone? And why did I both dread and crave it? I sat by the fire, staring at the dancing flames, but the moment in the shed with Raymond kept replaying in my head. He'd been so close, his words and gaze breaking through my walls, and I didn't know how long I could pretend everything was fine. When the guests started heading back inside, I followed, hoping the party's noise would drown out my inner chaos. But when Raymond suggested we slip into the living room to keep talking, I realized I was running from a truth that was getting harder to avoid. Would this conversation set me free, or would it pull me deeper into feelings I wasn't ready to face? The living room was quieter than the backyard, though music still hummed from the speakers, and my friends' voices blended into a background buzz. Most people were dancing or chatting in the kitchen, so Raymond and I were almost alone, sitting on the couch in the far corner. He looked calm, but I noticed his fingers tapping lightly on his knee, like he was nervous too. I tried to think of how to start, but the words stuck in my throat. He spoke first, asking what I was thinking about back in the shed. His voice was gentle but direct, and I felt my cheeks start to burn. I mumbled that I didn't know how to explain what was going on in my head, but he didn't let me dodge it. He said he'd noticed how I'd been looking at him all night, and it didn't feel like just happiness about seeing him again. His words were like a mirror, showing what I'd been trying to hide, and I felt panic mixed with relief. I admitted that his return had stirred something in me I didn't expect, and I wasn't sure what it meant. My voice shook, but I forced myself to keep going, because staying silent felt scarier. Raymond listened without interrupting, and his gaze was so warm I almost forgot where we were. He shared that he'd faced similar feelings in the Navy, and he'd learned not to fear them, even if it wasn't easy. He said no one should force me to figure it all out right now, but I needed to be honest with myself. His words were like a lighthouse in my confusion, and I felt something inside me start to open up. I wanted to say more, to tell him how his presence made my heart race, but fear still held me tight. We were sitting closer than we needed to, and I noticed his shoulder brushing mine slightly when he leaned in to make a point. It was barely there, but my body reacted like it was everything. I wanted to move even closer, but just then the living room door swung open, and Claire walked in, holding her phone and laughing at something she'd been texted. She stopped when she saw us, and her smile dimmed a little. She asked if she was interrupting, but her tone was tight. I quickly said it was fine and got up to change the song just to break the tension. Claire stayed, chatting about how someone spilled punch in the kitchen, but I was barely listening. My mind was with Raymond, with how close we'd been to something big. He looked at me, and I knew he felt the tension too. I tried to act normal, laughing at Claire's jokes, but inside I was screaming for her to leave so we could keep going. But the moment was gone, and I didn't know how to get it back. What would I say if we got another chance to be alone? And why did I feel like every second with him was pushing me toward a point of no return? I stood by the speakers, pretending to pick a new song, but really trying to stop my hands from shaking after talking with Raymond. His words, his closeness in the living room, had left me teetering on the edge of something, and I didn't know if I wanted to step forward or pull back. The party raged on, but I felt disconnected from everyone except him. When he came over and suggested we go upstairs to talk without interruptions, my heart stopped. This was the moment I'd been both waiting for and dreading. What would I do if we were alone? And how could I deny what I was feeling when he looked at me like he saw everything? I nodded, and we climbed the stairs to my room, away from the noise and prying eyes. It was quiet up there, with only a faint hum of music seeping through the floor. I sat on the edge of my bed, and Raymond leaned against my desk, looking at me with the same warmth as before, but now there was something new in his eyes, resolve. He said he didn't want to push me, but he felt something happening between us that we both knew was there. His words were so direct that I felt the air leave my lungs. I wanted to argue, to say he was wrong, but the truth was, I couldn't lie to him or myself anymore. I admitted that I'd been fighting myself all night because his presence made me feel things I shouldn't. My voice was barely audible, but he stepped closer and I could feel the warmth of his body even without touching him. He said he knew how hard it was, but sometimes you have to let yourself feel, even if it's scary. His voice was low, almost a whisper, and I felt my walls crumbling. I looked into his eyes, and in that moment, everything I'd been holding back broke free. I leaned toward him, and our lips met, softly, hesitantly, but with a force that made me tremble. The kiss was brief, but it turned my world upside down. We pulled back, staring at each other, and I saw the same turmoil in his eyes that I felt. We both knew this was wrong, that it shouldn't have happened, but in that moment, nothing else existed. I wanted to say something, to explain, but words wouldn't come. He touched my cheek, his fingers warm, and I felt my heart beating in time with his. This wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, something I couldn't name but didn't want to lose. But before we could say anything, there was a knock at the door. I flinched, like I'd been caught doing something criminal, and stepped away from Raymond, trying to pull myself together. The door opened and Claire stood there, holding her phone, her face unreadable. She said she was looking for me to say goodbye, but her eyes flicked to Raymond, and I felt the tension in the room thicken. I mumbled that I'd come down soon, and she nodded but lingered like she wanted to say more. When she finally left, I looked at Raymond, and we both knew this moment had changed everything. What would I say if she suspected something? And how could I go on, knowing this kiss was only the beginning? I stared at the closed door where Claire had just disappeared, feeling panic tighten my throat. The kiss with Raymond still burned on my lips, and I didn't know how to go back to normal life after what had just happened. We stayed in my room, and the silence between us was heavy, full of words we couldn't say. But when we finally started talking, admitting our feelings were real, I realized this moment was just the start of something impossible. What would happen if the truth got out? And how could I live knowing Claire might have seen more than I wanted? Raymond sat beside me on the bed, and his closeness was both a comfort and a torment. He said we couldn't ignore what happened, but he also admitted it wouldn't be easy. His voice was steady, but I saw his hands tremble slightly, and it made him feel more real, more reachable. I confessed that I was scared, not just of what others would think, but of what this meant for me. I'd never thought I could feel this strongly, especially for him. He nodded, saying he was scared too, but didn't regret what we did. We spoke quietly, almost whispering, like we were afraid the walls would hear. I told him how I'd been fighting my thoughts about him all night, but every look, every word from him only made the pull stronger. He listened, and his eyes were so understanding that I felt safe, despite the chaos inside. He admitted he'd felt the same from the moment he saw me at the party, and it hit me like a shock. Knowing it was mutual was both a relief and a burden. We shifted closer, and his hand covered mine, his fingers lacing through mine, creating a warmth I didn't want to lose. But that moment of closeness was fragile. I knew we couldn't stay here forever, that guests were still downstairs, that Claire could come back. We decided to head down to avoid suspicion, but before we did, he leaned in and pressed his forehead to mine, his breath mingling with mine. It wasn't a kiss, but it was so intimate that my heart clenched. We promised each other we'd talk more later when we were ready, but I knew that conversation would be the hardest of my life. When we got back to the living room, the party was winding down. Guests were starting to leave, and I tried to act normal, saying goodbyes and thanking everyone for coming. But my heart wasn't there. It was still in that room, in those minutes with Raymond. I noticed Claire by the door, and her gaze was colder than usual. She said she forgot her jacket and went upstairs to get it. My blood ran cold because I knew she might go to my room, where the air still held our tension, and she came back, too fast. Claire walked into the living room, holding her jacket, but her face was twisted with shock and anger. She looked at me, then at Raymond, and said she'd seen us through the cracked door when she went up. Her voice shook as she accused us of hiding something dirty, of lying to everyone around us. I tried to explain, but the words stuck, and her shout cut me off. She turned and stormed out of the house, leaving me standing there like the world had collapsed. Thanks for listening to this story, guys. It's been an emotional ride, and I hope it made you think. What would you do in my shoes? How would you handle a truth like this? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I really want to hear what you think. And don't forget to hit that like button if you want more stories like this.